Welcome to the Wanderer's History Podcast. Today we'll talk about a historical figure with somewhat of a legendary aura attached to his life, Vlad Tepes, or Dracula, translated also to the Impaler. Before we continue, I'd like to remind you to please hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already to make sure you never miss any new material from this podcast. A very good secondary source for this podcast has been Ștefan Bărbulescu's Vlad Tepes Between Legend and Historical Truth, along with works from other Romanian historians such as Ade Xenopol, Giurăscu, and Nagu Juvara. Vlad Tepes, anglicized as Vlad the Impaler, was ruler of Wallachia and an important figure of early modern Romanian history. He was son of Vlad Dracul, the Dragon, also voivode of Wallachia, made member of the Order of the Dragon in 1431 by Sigismund of Luxembourg. The Order of the Dragon was dedicated to halting the Ottoman advance into Europe, somewhat of a main objective for Vlad the Impaler throughout his three separate reigns of Wallachia. These reigns would be the first one between October and November of 1448, the second one between August 1456 and December 1462, and the third brief one in 1476, towards the end of the year. He was born in the late 1420s or early 1430s, with Romanian historians generally agreeing on the year 1431, in the Transylvanian Saxon town of Sighișoara. Wallachia, during his grandfather's reign, Mircea the Elder, and Vlad Dracul, his father, was known for being a thorn for the Ottomans, posing significant resistance through battles such as Rovine in 1395. Since 1417, the peace between Wallachia and the Ottomans put the Wallachians in a state of suzerainty with the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans would record important and decisive victories, such as Varna in 1444, slowly allowing for the advancement of the Ottomans in the northern Balkans and Central Europe. Peace between Vlad Dracul, the Impaler's father, and the Ottomans was a reason for John Hunyadi, Hungarian ruler who aided Vladislav II get the Wallachian throne after Vlad Dracul was murdered, to enter Wallachia. Moreover, in 1447 we see Hunyadi declaring himself as Partium Transalpinarum Voievoda, in other words, also voivode of Wallachia. Until 1448, Vlad Tepes should be held as ward along with his brother, Radu the Handsome, at the court of Sultan Murad II. Vlad the Impaler briefly took control of Wallachia between October and December of 1448, before being defeated by Vladislav II, who had returned from the defeat of Kosovo-Polia in 1448 and removed the young Vlad from the Wallachian throne. Much is unknown about Vlad the Impaler's whereabouts until 1456, a period which saw the Ottoman failure to capture Belgrade, but also saw John Hunyadi die a few weeks later in 1456. Also in Moldova, Petru II, Hunyadi's brother-in-law and protege, was no more. The objective had become to eliminate Vladislav II, seen by the Impaler as an usurper enabled by the Wallachian nobility and boyars. Vladislav II's pro-Ottoman policies led to more and more friction with Hunyadi, and it is clear that in 1456 he crossed the Carpathians into Wallachia from Transylvania with an army led by Hunyadi, and Vlad the Impaler managed to kill Vladislav II. Hunyadi said that Vlad Tepes would successfully defend the south of Transylvania against the Ottomans. For him, he was a buffer. In 1456, we see Vlad the Impaler swearing oath to Hungary and also other policies like granting commercial freedoms and privileges with Brasov and Sibiu. With Hunyadi perishing after the siege of Belgrade in 1456, Tepes had to sign a peace with the Ottomans, recognizing the volatility of the geopolitical situation, however having in mind the objective of autonomy for Wallachia. And it is believed that an important step in all of this was Stefan the Great's coronation as Moldovan voivode. The situation of Transylvania would also get very tense also once Matthias Corvinus became king, especially related to trade and protectionism around the cities of Brașov and Sibiu, known at the time as Hermannstadt. What didn't help was the fact that Dan II, son of Vladislav II, killed by Vlad the Impaler, waited the opportunity to dethrone the Impaler. On the 22nd of April 1460, Dan was defeated and peace was agreed between Brașov and Vlad the Impaler. From 1460 onwards, Vlad the Impaler began to focus on what would be a very turbulent couple of years of war, conflict, and tensions with the Ottoman Empire. In 1458, we know from a document entitled, quote, La Progenia de la Casa de Octomani, with an anonymous writer, that a vizier called Mahmud Pasha crossed the Danube and took 5,000 Christian prisoners from Wallachia, but was surprised by an army of Vlad the Impaler, and out of 18,000 Ottoman troops, no more than 8,000 made it back, with the Christians being released by Vlad. There would be no more conflict in the meantime until 1462, of substantial and significant note. But Nicolae Iorga does mention the tribute of over 3 years being unpaid to the Ottomans, worth 30,000 gold. Vlad the Impaler would justify the unpayment because of the uncertainty of an imminent attack from Transylvania and opposition of the boyars. Once Mehmed also found out about the secret alliance with Matthias Corvinus from 1460, war seemed inevitable. In 1462, Mehmed launched a campaign against Wallachia while also aiming at Kilia, strategic outpost near the Danube Delta. It is interesting to note that between 1460 and 1462, we would see Ottoman hostilities against Albania paused for a brief while Skanderbeg of Albania was away on the Italian expedition. Vlad the Impaler's 1462 campaign was effective and brutal, seeing the Wallachians obliterate towns like Samovit, Gigen, Silistra, Aldemir, Hrušova, Turtucaia, Batin, Novigrad, all the way to Rahova, along with 2 Danubian Ottoman outposts at Turnu and Giurgiu. In a war bulletin or journal dated 11th of February 1462, it was recorded that 23,884 people had been killed during this campaign. These events caught everyone's attention, from the Venetian ambassador in Buda to Mehmed II, Ottoman Sultan himself. Vlad was aware of the imminent Ottoman attack, also knowing of the danger of the Ottoman fleet coming from the Black Sea and the Danube. Because of the vast numerical superiority of the Ottoman army, Vlad the Impaler had to rely on quick harassing tactics, hit and run, targeting supply caravans and constantly hitting the Ottoman morale. Prime example of this would be the night attack between the 17th and 18th of June 1462, hitting the Anatolian contingent at dark while it was sleeping of the Ottoman army. This contingent had not seen much battle, and the aim of the night attack was also to assassinate Mehmed II himself. Mehmed survived and ordered a counterattack in the morning, leading to the near capture of Vlad the Impaler, thought to have barely escaped, wounded. The night attack caused minor damage, physical damage, to the Ottoman army, but it was more effective in terms of plummeting the morale. It was thought to be somewhere between Târgoviște and Nicopolis. When the Ottoman army approached Târgoviște, the Ottomans saw the plains full of impaled soldiers, a gruesome spectacle that must have struck fear in the Ottoman army. To conclude, the 1462 Ottoman campaign in Wallachia was the following from a geographic perspective. It started at Nicopolis and Turnu around the 4th of June, then moved to Târgoviște on the 18th, then towards Buzău eastwards between the 26th and 29th, finally making way to Brăila on the 29th of June. By the end of this, Vlad the Impaler had kept his Wallachian throne. It was an undecided result, arguably a short short-lived tactical victory for the Wallachians, given the circumstances. However, by December 1462, in a very blurry sequences of events in Wallachian and Romanian history, Vlad the Impaler is removed and replaced by his brother Radu cel Frumos, the Handsome. It wasn't the Turks or the Hungarians that removed him, but mainly the nobles or boyars who saw this perpetual state of war as not beneficial in any way for Wallachia. Radu the Handsome had support from the Ottoman Sultan, who wanted re-establishment of peaceful tributary relations, whereas Vlad the Impaler wanted to continue the war against the Sultan. By the 26th of November, we see Vlad the Impaler arrested and imprisoned in Buda and released only in 1474. His presence in Transylvania in 1475 would reconfirm the wishes of the Hungarians to reinstate him to the Wallachian throne. We'd also see him in Matthias Corvinus's army in Bosnia. The restoration of Vlad the Impaler to the Wallachian throne could only happen because of Moldovan-Transylvanian cooperation, with efforts from both Corvinus and Stefan the Great of Moldova. On the 8th of November, we see Vlad the Impaler announcing the dethroning of Laiot the Basarab. Though Stefan the Great left him a personal guard of 200, we see Vlad the Impaler being assassinated, with news of his death reaching Moldova and Stefan the Great around January 10th, 1477. He would be assassinated, of course, in 1476. 3 reigns, first and last being very short, with the most meaningful being the second, which saw him as an anti-Ottoman crusader who had to face very difficult geopolitical circumstances and difficult neighbors. The brutality of Vlad Tepes, or Vlad the Impaler, especially through impaling the enemy soldiers, echoed throughout history. Irish writer Bram Stoker used the mythology of the dragon in his book from 1897 to associate Vlad the Impaler with his character Dracula, a bloodthirsty vampire. Movies with Christopher Lee and Gary Oldman were adapted from the book. There is little historical truth or analogies between Dracula, the character, and the book, and the history of Vlad the Impaler of Wallachia. All in all, Vlad the Impaler represented a danger to the Ottoman Empire in the 15th century, one that nearly managed to kill Mehmed II, conqueror of Constantinople. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wanderer's History podcast about Vlad the Impaler. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel to make sure you never miss any new material from the podcast. And until the next time, all the best.